I'm very happy to see some names, familiar names on the screen here, but also a lot of people I'm meeting for the first time. So it's a pleasure to see all of you today. Um, let me just begin. I'm planning to talk for about 30 minutes. We'll see how it goes, but I'll aim for around 30 minutes to give you sort of my thoughts about these issues that have come up here with AI and education, English education, university education. And then get your comments and feedbacks and objections and things like that. And then hopefully for about 25 minutes. And then at the very end, I will sort of sum up, give my own thoughts, my own conclusion about it. So let me share my screen. Um, okay, there we go. So the title is University English Education in the Age of AI. So first of all, the today's participants, these are the people who registered for the event today. Um, it was quite a variety. To be honest with you, it's a bigger variety than I was expecting, which was great. So we have people from a lot of people from universities, both public and private universities in Japan. Judging just from the names of the universities, there were universities, people affiliated with universities in China, the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, India, USA, Canada, and Chile. Perhaps other places as well too. I didn't see the final list of registrants. In terms of the jobs or the academic roles among the academics, we have students from undergraduate to doctoral students. We also have faculty at all levels, from lecturers to professors. We also have some researchers, people in research positions, as well as administrative staff. And there are also people beyond academia, so people who seem to be from affiliated with government agencies, educational publishing, the private sector. There's a few people, one or two people who mark themselves as freelancers from non-governmental organizations. And so welcome all. So, but as a result, my when I the if you saw the description that I put on the that was on the website, and at that time I was imagining almost all University of Tokyo people, and so some of that I've changed it a little because a little bit broader audience than I was expecting, but I hope it will be interesting discussion to everybody. A little bit more about myself. So I was born in 1957 in Pasadena, California, in the U.S. So I'm 67 years old now. I got my degrees in linguistics and mathematics from the University of California, graduate school, two master's degrees at the University of Chicago. And then after working for a few years, I moved to Japan in 1983. So it's been 41 years that I've been living in Japan. And I didn't know any Japanese before I came here at the age of 26. But I started studying after I came, while working as well too. And then after I studied Japanese really hard, in 1986, I started working as a translator, translating Japanese to English. And that was my main job for almost 20 years. I translated Japanese to English for Japanese companies and government agencies and things, as well as doing some freelance writing and teaching, continued to teach English throughout that time. And also, after, I don't know, 7 or 8 years as a translator, I started helping publishing companies with the editing of dictionaries, working as a lexicographer. But then I had a big career change. In 2005, I was invited and I was hired by the University of Tokyo as a faculty member. And so, over the next 18 years, I taught on the Komaba campus of the University of Tokyo, affiliated with the College of Arts and Sciences, and later the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. And there I managed and did research on English education and language education related topics and other things. Did a lot of different work there. But I think that for the point of this talk today is I was closely involved with both the University of Tokyo's English education, but as a teaching in the program, but also being an administrator with one or two of the programs. And then I also supervised research among graduate students on topics related to English education in related fields. So during that time, I had a lot of contacts with other universities in Japan, faculty and sometimes students, administrators, who were all dealing with various issues related to university English education. And then I reached the age of 65, and at the age of 65, I retired from my full-time position. And now I was rehired part-time. Though my main job now is helping the top university administration with some administrative and mostly communication matters. I'm only part-time work home here, and I'm in my home in Yokohama right now. So I'm semi-retired. But partly because I'm semi-retired, I spend most of my time paying attention to AI. Okay, so back in 2016, um, Google, without making much of an announcement, suddenly shifted their free translation software, Google Translate, to a new form of technology called neural networks. And overnight, in I think it was November 2016, the quality of the translations between Japanese and English on Google Translate suddenly got a lot better. Before that point, they had been worthless, terrible, and then they became so-so. But that going from worthless to so-so meant that people learning languages, especially writing. So people and I could now use Google Translate to translate between their first language and English, for example. So in particular, because at the University of Tokyo, we had been developing and running academic writing programs for undergraduates, it suddenly became a big issue. Now these students who used to have to write everything basically with their own English knowledge, if they wanted to, they could write what they were doing in Japanese and translate it into English, and the English output was not terrible. It was okay. So that raised an issue for translation. I raised an issue for English, some types of English education, especially writing. And also it raised issues for, researchers who don't have English as their first language. How could researchers who have to write papers in English, could they now be using machine translation to do that? So that was a big advance, but it was looking back, I realize now it was a relatively limited effect. But then 2 years ago, we started seeing what is now this very rapid development and change and turmoil by more diverse and general purpose artificial intelligence. The first thing that struck me was in the summer of 2022 when there were these text to image models started to be released. So the one was DALL-E from the company OpenAI, another is called Midjourney, and there are a lot of others now where you just type a prompt, you give an explanation of, a university professor playing the piano on the street in Tokyo on a rainy evening. That's a prompt I used. And then it somehow understood this text and created an image that was not bad in many cases, sometimes surprisingly good. And then in December or no, late November of 2022, almost 2 years ago, OpenAI released ChatGPT. Okay, so that opened the floodgates for the issues about AI in education and many other fields. So the striking thing about ChatGPT was that it was interactive, and it could understand. It seemed to understand. Okay, seemed to understand language and many other things. So that was really a shock for me and many other people. And so then the developments have continued. So among the key ones, I think in 2023 OpenAI released the successor to the first version of GPT called GPT-4, and it was at that point that the machine translation between Japanese and English became possible with this model. And I say on the slide that it was meaning sensitive machine translation. So that this is an important point. The previous Google Translate had been pretty good, but there was no signs that it understood the meaning of the sentences that it was translating. And it only translated sentence by sentence by sentence. And so that things like pronoun reference, what is the he, the she, the it in the sentence? What does it refer to in the previous sentence? It screwed those up often. Okay, so it was not coherent with long texts at all. But starting with GPT-4, the models could grasp the context of what was being translated. And as a result, the translations made much more sense to the users. And it's continued to get better since then. One of the things frequently test is the translation quality. And the translation quality between Japanese and English for long texts now in November 2024 is much better than it was in, say, March of 2023. In many ways, no, very few hallucinations, much longer texts are possible. So translation itself has gotten much better. But as you all know, these GPT, ChatGPT, and other models like Claude and Gemini can also write and do many other things. One of the other things they can do, which is AI tools for writing computer code. Doesn't seem to be directly related to our main topic today, but the discussions about that among software developers have been really interesting for me because it's very similar to the debates among educators or among translators about how is this software really intelligent? Can it really do what humans have been doing or not? And so software developers are in a big debate about this. So some are using these tools to write their software. They say it saves them a lot of time. It's very effective. Others say, no, 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 they make these mistakes that render them useless. And there's debates in the middle. So that's another interesting debate. But also, what happened after ChatGPT, there's been this huge rush among companies to develop and to deploy AI. So even now, I often see ChatGPT as being used as the sort of the pronoun that representing AI. But ChatGPT, made by the company OpenAI, is only one of a number of very strong large language models. And so Claude from the company Anthropic, Gemini made by Google, and there are a number of Chinese companies that are coming up with quite powerful models that are apparently very strong with Chinese. And there's a French company called Mistral that develops a pretty good model. And so the competition is very, very tough. It's changing very quickly, and the models keep getting smarter and smarter, and the technology around them, the tools you can use with them, are constantly being developed as these companies who have huge investments. They're able to attract huge investment funds. They're investing a lot of money in trying to make their products more competitive and useful. Um, and another thing is that the strongest models are what are called closed source or closed weight. So Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, those companies are not releasing the what are called the weights, which is the set of numbers that creates the intelligence. But companies like, well, Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, has been releasing some increasingly strong models called Llama that anybody can download. And if you have a powerful enough computer, you can run it on your own computer, you can modify it. And so there are dozens of free open weight models that are also available. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind. So the main point I'm saying is that there's it's widespread competition. It's very diverse. It's international, and so any kind of attempts that people were talking about a year and a half ago to somehow restrict AI or slow down development or stop research will face real difficulties. Okay, I think we have to accept this is here. It's going to happen. We have to deal with it. Um, and then within this year, 2024, going on is, for example, real-time voice interaction and interpreting are getting much better. I still see room for improvement, but for example, just 2 months ago, OpenAI released their advanced voice mode, in which the model can hear your pronunciation, for example, and so it can correct a student's pronunciation in a foreign language. It can also make a lot of different accents. It's not as good as it should be, but it's for some types of language learning. Another major milestone has been reached, in that for it's quite a good interactor for with speech. Also, the contexts are getting longer. So when ChatGPT was first released, it could only handle about 2,000 English words, 1,500 English words, and then it would forget what had happened before. You would have a conversation back and forth with it, and after a while, it would stop making sense. Well, now the large models have context of 100,000 words. In the case of Google's Gemini, the context is, well, 2 million tokens, approximately a million words. You can put two or three entire books into it, discuss those books with it, and have a long conversation that continues to make sense for an extended period of time. Those context windows will keep getting longer and longer. Just this within the last week or two, Apple has started putting some AI, very dumbed down AI, on its actual phones. This is within the next few years, I think this will become much more common. So rather than accessing the models in the cloud where there are privacy issues, time delay issues, it might be expensive, we will gradually be able to use these powerful AI models on our computers, our phones, our tablets, locally with the privacy maintained. And so that's another, you won't need an internet connection either to use them. So that's something that's coming too. And then another thing that was very shocking was just in the last couple of months, OpenAI released something called O1 Preview. And there's a more advanced version that's apparently in the wings that does multi-step reasoning. I don't see much application for things like translation or language learning for it, but for some subjects like mathematics or physics or other, especially scientific subjects, where the core of the research is reasoning through a series of logical steps using very sophisticated knowledge, and then going back and double checking whether the reasoning is correct or not. Apparently, this OpenAI preview for some types of reasoning is really powerful. So it's the doctoral level. It's ready to do original research in theoretical physics or pure mathematics and things like that. And so it's not just predicting the next token. It's not just producing text automatically. It's doing what is similar, not the same thing as human reasoning, but somehow similar to human reasoning. It's a recursive, self-reflective process. And so that has a lot of implications, I think, for research in particular in right now, especially in the sciences, but I think as in the months and years ahead, it's going to be affecting a lot of other fields as well too. So, um, for education, looking at education, so AI has a lot of issues for education. Um, Among the issues that you've probably heard most of these, and I'm not going to really deal with these, but I just want to recognize them as important issues. So one is, are students who use AI for coursework cheating? So if a student is assigned to write a paper for a class and the student has ChatGPT or Claude write the essay, is that cheating? Okay, so it's in many cases, yes, it's cheating. The teacher says don't do it, and the student does it. But the difficult issue is that you can use these models, sort of interactively. The student comes up with an idea, asks the AI for suggestions. The AI gives some suggestions. The students use that idea, modifies it a bit, then gives a series of bullet points to the AI, and then the AI turns those bullet points into a paragraph. Okay, so it's the student has input in it. The AI is also contributing a lot, and the resulting paragraph is really good by conventional standards. Is that cheating? Okay, so there's a huge gray zone where people will disagree. And then the second one is, how does AI use affect students' learning outcomes? So, what everybody thinks is, well, if students become dependent on AI, then they won't learn whatever the subject is themselves. Okay. So, and I'm sure that will happen in some cases. But it's also, I think, becoming clear that it is possible to use AI interactively in a way that enhances learning. Okay, so how do educators draw the line? Sometimes AI is harmful, sometimes it's helpful, and then there's a huge gray zone in the middle where we don't know yet because it's still new and it's changing quickly. So should students be taught and encouraged to use AI or not? Some teachers are doing it, encouraging it, other teachers are forbidding it. I think a lot of teachers don't really know what to do yet. Um, and then another issue is, how should AI use in the workplace and society be reflected in curricula and classes? So what you so many teachers want to ban the use of AI, and also not only teachers, I think there's a lot of students that don't like AI. I've talked to students like that. I've read about that. a lot of students feel uncomfortable about this alien intelligence that seems to be able to do what they're trying to learn. And so there are people who want to keep it out of the education system for the most part. But on the other hand, there is not the same resistance in the workplace and society. I think especially in Japan, because there's a worker shortage, there's a labor shortage here. There seems to be a very positive reaction, well, overall positive reaction, in government and in business. The idea that, well, if we have AI, we can improve productivity and make up for the fact that we're having trouble finding enough employees. And so, if people in the workplace and society outside the university are using it, if the students themselves will be using it when they leave the university, does it make sense to ban it in the from the students during school? So that's a difficult question. And then the technology is advancing very, very quickly. And how do you keep up with that? So if you haven't tried these things for 6 months or a year, well, they've changed a lot. And within like like I said, since I'm semi-retired, I spend every morning I get up. The first thing I do each morning is I go to YouTube and look at my YouTube feed, and I get a lot of videos about AI and the developments. And usually once a week or every 2 weeks, there's a big advance or a big change that you need to know about. Then I put in smaller type here all the other even bigger questions outside of education. There are a lot of issues about AI. I'm not ignoring them. I want to, but we were focusing on education. So privacy, bias, data ownership, energy consumption, safety, employment, government. There's a lot of issues about it. But maybe if you want to raise them during the question and answer period, that's very welcome. But I will skip over that. So here's my position on it. Okay, for today, where we're focusing on well, English education or education at the university level, this is one of the issues that I think is a big issue. So, this is my own statement. Recent advances in AI enable interactive, individualized learning at low cost without a human teacher. So I think the two key points here are interactive and individualized. So the AI, it's not I ask a question and it gives me the answer. Okay, so it's not the AI it should not be considered as like a search engine or a reference book or a database. Okay, it's the fact that you can have this back and forth conversation and interaction and yield wisdom and knowledge out of that. Maybe. Okay, and that it can be focused for the individual learner. Okay, which is a big problem in conventional education. You have 20 students, 30 students in the classroom, one teacher, individualized education, going at each student's pace is difficult in those contexts, okay? And then I don't have any data to prove this, but I personally convinced of this. For motivated learners, AI assisted learning is or will soon be more effective than classroom teaching for most academic subjects, including foreign languages. I say most academic subjects because some like science lab courses and things like that are, where they have a hands-on work with, or, musical performance, dance performance. Those at this point, those are will not be handled well by AI that's just on a computer screen. Okay, but no, for subjects that are related to knowledge and thinking and intellectual processes, AI will be better for motivated learners. Okay, I'm running out of time. Okay, so moving on to English education in Japan, what do I see as before we get to the university context, the education in general. So universities in Japan, the English education at universities in Japan is conducted within the context of Japanese society, the Japanese educational system. The vast majority of students coming into Japanese universities studied English through in junior high schools and high schools that were subject to the government policy about education and also assumptions of Japanese society about the purposes of English education. So there are a number of paradoxes, fundamental problems as I see it. One is that all students must study English, but relatively few adults need it. So there's, data from some social surveys suggest maybe 10%, 15% of Japanese adults use English at any time in their work or social lives. 10 to 15%. How many Japanese travel overseas to other countries where English might be necessary? Well, fewer than 20%. I think it's about 17% of Japanese adults have passports. So 4 out of 5 Japanese adults don't even have a passport to travel overseas. Okay. So some Japanese people, adults, do need English. They use it. Okay. If a university like ours, University of Tokyo, I'm sure it's a much higher number of our graduates do it. But among the who need English, not all of them though. But among Japanese in general, most people do not need English, but they all must study English. And another contradiction, another paradox is the English language, like any natural language, is diverse and complex, many dialects, many idiolects, many different versions of it. And also the children's learning, every child is different. Children learn in different ways, they have different abilities, they have different preferences. But the Japanese education system, especially at the elementary school and junior high school levels, assumes that all children should study English in basically the same way, at the same pace, starting at the same age. So the target of the study, what they're studying, English, is very complex and diverse, but there's this quite rigid set of educational guidelines and curriculums that assumes all the students are moving together at the same pace. And then Japan is becoming increasingly multilingual, but the education system focuses solely on English. And so it really, it's not on, for example, Chinese, Vietnamese, Nepali, other languages. If you look at the citizenship of foreign residents in Japan, I mean, of course, citizenship is not an indicator of language ability exactly, but I think it's a current over 800,000 Chinese citizens currently living in Japan. There are only about 60,000 citizens of the United States in Japan. And the increase is quite rapid right now for citizens of China, Vietnam, Nepal, and other Asian countries. And most of them don't speak English. And, so Japanese companies and Japanese government agencies, they face a lot of language problems right now. They have to communicate with these immigrants in many different ways for many different reasons, and most of them don't know English. But those bureaucrats working in those government agencies in school, they studied only English. They have very few staff members who know Chinese or Vietnamese or Nepali, as long as those staff members are Japanese citizens. So just very briefly, so moving on to my main point, two recent controversies over English education in Japan. These are a couple of my PhD students wrote their theses on these topics, so I'm familiar with them, but they were also very interesting. One controversy was about whether to start regular English classes for all children at age 12 or age 10. So until 2019, the regular required English classes began the first year of junior high school, age 12. And then the following year, those regular classes started at age 10. And there had been a debate for decades about whether to lower the starting age of the classes. The key point about that controversy was, all right, from my point of view, for today's lesson, the key point about it was the debate was only about whether to change from 12 to 10 or 12 to 9 for all students. There was no substantive debate about whether to start some children at 12 and some children at 10. There was no substantive debate or controversy about to, start some children would study English and other children would study Chinese and others would study French and others wouldn't study any foreign language. That was not on the table. So the whole discussion was about what age will all children begin the required classes, okay? There was another debate but that went ahead, by the way. The proposal did pass, did succeed. Another one that failed was there was a debate in the late 2010s about the government wanted to add an English speaking component to the common university entrance exam. What used to be called the center exam or the center test is now called the common test or common exam. And they wanted to outsource the speaking component. So every student would have to, do a short speaking test. Their speaking ability would be evaluated. That score would go on to their test score for the entrance exam. And the reason for that, I think, was mainly to kind of encourage high schools to speak English more in the classroom, get students speaking English more, so that in this high stakes test they would have to speak it. That proposal failed. It reached the brink of being implemented, and then there were just too many objections to it, and it failed. And the main reason it failed, there were a number of reasons, was that the proposal was considered unfair. Some students who lived in remote areas or had other issues, a lot of issues, there was a view that it was unfair, that you would not be treating all of the test takers equally. And so both of those controversies hinged on this one concept, this one notion of fairness, koheisei in Japanese, where this is a fundamental assumption about the language education or education in general in Japan, especially up through high school, or especially up through junior high school, is that all children will be treated equally and fairly. Um, at the University of Tokyo as well, too, the English class for undergraduates, the overall program itself is very much based on this concept of fairness. So all undergraduates take basically the same set of required English courses. There's some variation, but the main core courses, all the students take it, all 3,000 every year. And then for a long time, the classes had no streaming of by ability. Okay, so students in our, writing classes, say 15 years ago, you had some students who were basically native speakers of English, and highly educated in English, and you had students who had never spoken English before in their lives in the same class. Okay, and the class being taught in English, and that's very difficult for both the teacher and the students. And so we're able to get streaming done to a very rough level, into dividing students into three levels for one class and six or seven for another class. But it had a lot of resistance. Okay, any kind of streaming would seem to be unfair, right? The advanced students are getting special privilege. So it was difficult. We did succeed a little bit, okay? But not only in English, I was involved in other educational reform proposals and projects at Tokyo, and this fairness was a constant issue we had to struggle with. Okay, so any kind of proposal that would seem to privilege certain students or would face harsh opposition, and many proposals failed because of that. And this pressure for fairness, it comes most directly, I think, from the students themselves. So if any students feels that they themselves are being treated unfairly, they will object to that, and the faculty and administrators will listen to that. But it also reflects broader assumptions about the role of education in Japanese society, the fact that everybody should be treated fairly. Of course, that's wonderful in many ways, as a sort of a social policy. The problem is with AI. Okay, so yeah, as I said, AI enables this individualized learning. Okay. And fairness is in conflict with that. So individualized is inherently unfair. Every person is treated differently. They learn at their own pace, according to their own interests, according to their own goals, and the AI makes that much easier and cheaper. Okay, you don't have to hire a human teacher to do that. Okay. So this is what I see as one of the biggest issues for facing English education at the University of Tokyo, and probably a lot of university education in many countries as well too faces a similar debate in different ways. You know how you have to teach, you're supposed to be teaching and evaluating all the students according to a standard curriculum, a standard set of rubrics for evaluation, but the students themselves could be learning at their own pace if I don't know if you notice this word. This is the same slide I showed you earlier, but now I add one word. For motivated learners, AI assisted learning is or soon will be more effective than classroom teaching. So if the student wants to learn the subject, they will be able to use the AI either directly, ChatGPT or Claude, or using some bot that is drives that in the background. Motivated learners, every day they want to sit down and talk with the bot and learn. They will learn better from the AI than they would in a classroom. Okay. So, but it's for motivated learners. Okay. So what is the issue with motivation? Well, this is again my feeling, my view right now. One is that even with friendly bots or gamification where you have a like you score points, you play a video game and learn at the same time, and other emotionally sticky features, AI will not be able to sufficiently motivate university students to study foreign languages or other challenging subjects. So those of you who are foreign language teachers, English teachers here, I don't think you need to worry about your job, okay? Because most university teachers, university students are not very motivated to learn English. Okay. So you're not going to have masses of students complain, look, I've learned English better from this bot than I have from your class. Okay. They're still going to have to take classes. Okay. If they're studying languages. Look, I believe that motivation will continue to come primarily from the desire to emulate, impress, compete with, please other humans, one's teachers, one's peers, one's parents, other human beings. Okay. So I don't think for the most part people will be motivated to learn from the bot. Okay, so we will have these very attractive bots with cute faces on the screen and these cute voices who remember you and say nice things to you. So there's a lot of dangers with that kind of interactive AI, but I don't think for the most part that will within the next 5 or 10 years will be replacing the motivation for learners. Um, Also, another thing with languages, I mean, there are a number of types of, I'm going way over time, but there are a number of different types of motivation, right? So there's, extrinsic motivation where you're motivated for some external reward, to get a job, to get a high grade, something like that. And there's also intrinsic motivation where you just enjoy the thing that you're studying, you're motivated by within yourself. But people who have written, who do research on motivation also point out, in the case of languages, there's an additional important type of motivation, which I think is called integrative motivation, or there may be other terms for that. The idea that you want to learn this foreign language in order to communicate with other people, to understand people in other cultures, and to talk to people in other cultures. Okay, so that's a distinctive type of motivation for foreign languages. Probably many of you here in your own lives have been motivated to learn other languages by the desire to interact with other people, to learn about other people, to talk to other people. Okay. I don't think that's going to be interactive motivation will not be very strong in the case of these human-like bots. Okay. So, first of all, the bots are all multilingual. Okay. So, if I'm a Japanese speaker and I have a bot who, I can always speak in Japanese with it. Okay, I don't have to speak English. Okay, that's very different from having a potential friend who you don't have a common language and you want to learn that friend's language. Okay, so humans, because of our limitation as humans, our monolingualness or our low lingualness, we motivate each other to learn each other's languages. The AI, I don't think, will be very good motivator for that. So once again, I don't think you need to worry too much about the losing your jobs if you're a language teacher. But remember what I said here that the AI-assisted learning is or will soon be more effective than classroom teaching. So what's the purpose of classroom teaching? If it's learning skills, acquiring knowledge, learning, becoming a better critical thinker is a popular term. You can, though, for those types of things, AI will be better. It's already better in many cases. But young people still need to be motivated to do it. And so I think that motivation will come from human beings, from teachers. But the educational system is set up for, you know, non-individualized learning in many different ways. We're in classes together. The students all enter the university at the same time. They take the required classes. They proceed at a very similar pace with each other. They're evaluated on tests. They're all evaluated with the same test at the end of the semester, right? And so when you have but the goal of education is learning in a very broad sense. And if most of that learning can be done by these very cheap, very fast, and in some ways very attractive AI bots, well, then what's going to happen to the institutions of education? So at this point, I'm going to throw the question out to you. So what should we do? What should we do? What should educators do, especially about you know, adapting not only both their classes, their teaching, and also the educational system itself to this new age of AI. Okay, so the recording you just watched was the first two-thirds or so of the 1 hour Zoom session we had earlier today, November 5th, 2024. The last part where the participants asked questions and I responded to those wasn't recorded. So I'd like to just summarize a few of the questions that I remember and also my concluding remarks from this session. So one of the questions was about whether the use of these language models, which are trained, or at least the first versions were trained on large amounts of American English, a lot of text of standard English, and whether that would sort of distort students' views and maybe overemphasize or reinforce the views about the importance of the students learning so-called standard English and the various inequalities that can arise from those attitudes. And I said I think that has been a problem. So the first version of ChatGPT that came out was very heavily trained on English as opposed to other languages. And it was trained on a lot of sort of edited, published texts, a lot of it which was probably they had broken somebody's copyright. There was a lot of pirated texts that apparently went into the early versions of that, and so that when you the first version of ChatGPT, when you used it and when you tested it, I was always struck by how sort of vanilla its English was, and in a very American style. It seemed to have distilled this kind of mid American, inoffensive but also indistinct language that is probably indicative or representative of sort of the middle class white people in North America. I think that has changed to some extent, and so that of course the main AI companies are not revealing where they get the data that they use to train their models because they're being sued about that, and so they're keeping that secret. But they do seem to be getting more diverse in their training. I also mentioned that there are Chinese companies that are using mostly Chinese data and are apparently give much better performance on tasks conducted in Chinese. And so presumably that's going to, there is increasing diversity. Google has announced that they claim that their Gemini model is much more multilingual than others. Though, nevertheless, there might be inherently some sort of homogenization process in the way these models are trained and distilled, how the data is distilled, so that more distinctive regional and social class variants of English and other languages might not be well represented. But I did give a demonstration using OpenAI's advanced voice model. Let me just repeat that demonstration right now if I can. So here is the OpenAI. Hi, I would like to give a little demonstration of your ability to do different accents in English. Is that okay?
Sure, Tom. I can give that a go. Just let me know which accent you'd like to use.
Okay, could you say something, an interesting sentence or two in Jamaican English?
All right, let me give it a try. You know, in a Jamaica, we full of vibes and energy. Every little thing, we turn it into something special. How was that?
That was great. That was great. Okay, now something in Scottish English, contemporary Scottish English.
Glad you liked the Jamaican one. Here's a go at Scottish English. In Scotland, we're no strangers to a bit of rain, but it just makes the whiskey taste that much better, eh? How did that sound?
Okay, maybe it didn't sound quite as convincing as the Jamaican one, but well, I'll let that pass. Let me do another one. Can you, for example, speak French with a Mandarin Chinese accent?
I'll give it a try. Bonjour. Comment ça va? Je suis content de vous rencontrer aujourd'hui. How was that attempt?
Okay, I don't understand French, so I can't really tell. Okay, well, anyhow, thank you.
You're welcome. If there's anything else you'd like to hear or talk about, just let me know.
Okay, so that was ChatGPT's bot. I even though it's not a person, it has no consciousness. I still thanked it. Okay. Another question was from one of the teachers at the University of Tokyo who's been sort of incorporating discussions of AI in his classes. He mentioned how one thing he's been doing in his classes is having students sort of discussing with the students what AI can do, how and whether they should be using it in their education, in their learning. And my reaction to that was that I think that works at some universities with some types of students. So the students at the University of Tokyo, as I know from my experience teaching them, are in general quite conscious of their own learning process, and they're quite able to think about sort of issues at a meta level and abstract level, reflect upon their own learning process and how using AI, for example, might affect their learning. But I have a feeling that universities in general, from my experience teaching and meeting students at other universities, probably there would be a lot of students who would have trouble with, really getting a grasp on here's this new tool, this very, very powerful, flexible new tool, and then thinking about how that's affecting their learning process about something they haven't learned yet or they're still in the process of learning. I say that partly because my own experience of testing these latest models on, for example, reasoning skills. Are they reasoning about difficult, complex processes correctly or incorrectly? It's very difficult to assess those higher levels of reasoning for them. And so I think I'll constantly feel challenged myself about understanding how I should use AI. So it might be difficult to incorporate that kind of meta self-reflective, meta educational approach to it in classes. So when it was possible, I think that's a very, very good technique. Another person asked for examples of how AI could be used by a motivated learner. And one thing I mentioned was I thought from my own experience as when I was learning Japanese, my main goal, what motivated me to learn Japanese more than anything else, was I wanted to be able to read the language. And so I did spend a lot of time, learning, memorizing vocabulary and trying to read text closely. And I've taught reading in various contexts to Japanese students, English reading for quite a few years. And so one of the difficult things of you're reading a text in a foreign language and you come across a word or an expression you don't understand, you look it up in the dictionary. It might not be in the dictionary, but if it's in the dictionary, it might give a meaning that doesn't really help you understand what's going on there. I mean, there's idioms, there are words that have multiple meanings. Okay, this is what's called polysemy, and there are also combinations of words, phrases, and things that take on meaning that is separate from the meaning of the individual words. And there are also references to popular culture and all kinds of other things that can be difficult to find in the dictionary or even with a web search. And so what really surprised me about the first version of ChatGPT was that it could explain the meanings of words in their context, based on their context. And so somebody who wants to become better at reading another language can go through the text, try to figure out how much they understand. When they come across a word, phrase, sentence they don't understand, they ask the bot what it means. They ask the bot to translate it. They ask the bot to give more explanation. If they want to remember that a particular word, they ask the bot to come up with other example sentences of the words. So you can interact with the bot as you try to understand and deepen your comprehension of the meaning of the text. So that would be just one way. I'm reading comprehension is probably not the top priority for a lot of language learners, but the same thing can be done for other things as well too. Listening comprehension, speaking practice. A motivated learner, especially one who's self-reflective about their learning process, can interact with the bot, asking questions, asking it to ask you questions, and all kinds of things like that. And so then there were a few more questions and comments that people put in the chat, which I was very happy for. But I concluded this session by sort of talking about what I thought were the challenges that AI raises for education in general, university education, university English education in Japan, because of the issue of fairness was one example of a big problem. I thought that the insistence on fairness in education, as I talked about, really makes it difficult to implement reforms, educational reforms, because any reform is likely to upset the delicate balance in which all the students are perceived as being treated equally. But I think that this AI is a crisis. It's a serious issue that educators everywhere are facing right now. And so things have to be done. The educational system has to be rethought and redesigned. And so I would encourage the teachers who are, educators who are still in teaching, to first find out what the AI is doing, follow it as closely, try it themselves, and then to talk about it with each other, talk about it with their students, and talk about it with the higher levels at the universities or the institutions where they work, because it will take a lot of discussion. Okay, because fairness is one very powerful ideal or concept that has created this rigidity and resistance to change in the education system. There are others as well too. I mean, having to do with the degrees and the admission system and the age at which the students study. I mean, there are all these things that we sort of take for granted, but many of them are challenged by the appearance of these computers that can do the high-level intellectual activities that have been the focus of much educational process. Okay, so I did say, though, that I don't think that educators' jobs are necessarily threatened. I don't think that high school or university teachers are going to lose their jobs because the students are all just using bots to study on their own. For the reason I mentioned earlier, motivation is too weak for many of the students. They need the structure, they need the encouragement, they need the peer groups to continue their intellectual and emotional maturation process as they go through the educational system. But because learning has been a big part of education systems, is one of the major purposes, and because learning can be done with these bots very, very well, what goes on in the classroom, what goes on in the school needs to change. I imagine the solutions will look like something more, even more group activities than has been done before, more projects where students are working together under the guidance of a teacher to tackle various problems that don't have clear answers, and using AI tools when necessary, when it's useful. But thinking about not only how do we solve these problems, but how should we solve the problems? What should we do? So those ethical issues, what is good, what is better, what is bad, will also need to be worked out among the human beings. I don't think we're going to be trusting AI to make ethical decisions. And so how that kind of education, so the more group, more fluid focused, more fluidic education, can be incorporated into the structures of the educational system, will be a big challenge. And so but I think it's necessary. Okay, and I think it will be exciting in some ways to the faculty, the teachers who have to deal with that, who have to confront it, because they have to negotiate with a lot. You have to work along. There are a lot of stakeholders, and a lot of stakeholders with a lot of different views. And so, but this AI is a big deal. Okay, and so I encourage you and anybody who's still watching this video at the long end of this video to accept the challenge and to try to figure out together with others what should be done about education now that we have this increasingly powerful artificial intelligence. So thank you very much for staying until the end of this quite long video.